Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome to a live Thursday edition of the Post Up with David Grubb. I'm glad you're here with me, and a little bit different today, but with the way the week is gone, with the Pelicans opening up summer league play, and then some of the news that broke yesterday, particularly the Herb Jones extension. I just wanted to do this show live and try to interact with the fans a little bit, get your questions. So go ahead and start submitting those, if you will, so I can answer those at the end of the show. Try to give you as many direct answers as I possibly can. But as we know, plenty to talk about in the meantime. Sorry about that. A little problem there. But let's get into it. We'll start with the Summer League debut for the New Orleans Pelicans. And as we know, they lost in their debut 98-91 to the Minnesota Timberwolves. And, again, with Summer League, you don't want to get caught up in the results too much. You don't want to start thinking too much about whether or not your team is getting a particular amount of stats, whether or not they win any of these games. That's not the most important thing. The most important thing is how you get to where you're getting. What are the basic concepts that you're trying to implement on the coaching staff side? And then for the players, primarily, and Fran Fraschilla said this during the broadcast yesterday for ESPN2, the point for these younger players is to do what you do well. Show your coaches what your strengths are so that they can accurately implement them and use them during the regular season. If you're showcasing yourself for another team, then you'd also need to do the things that you do well. So when it comes to guys like Jeremiah Fears or Derek Queen or Micah Peavey, their final stat lines don't matter to me, and they shouldn't matter to you. What you should be looking at is, how do these guys play? Are they aggressive with the basketball? Do they make good decisions? Do they understand tempo and pace? Are they committed on both ends of the floor to being active, constantly being in motion, reading what the defense is doing, reacting more than just, letting things happen? So I think that if we see that from this team, then you can be excited whether they go 5-0, which they won't, if they go 4-1 the rest of the way, or if they go 1-5. If they lose all their games the rest of the way. That's not important. That's not the important thing, winning and losing here. What's important is, what do we see out of the players who are going to be a part of the Pelicans team when the regular season opens? So when you get to those players, there's four we're going to look at more than others. And that's without question. We start with Jeremiah Fears, the number 7 pick in the draft. And for him, there were really good moments. Not a perfect game, 4 of 12 shooting from the floor. But what you saw out of him were the things that you wanted to see out of a point guard at his position. He was aggressive from the opening tip. He attacked the basket. He had a pull-up 3 early in the game, so he wasn't scared to take the outside shot. Though, again, that remains a work in progress for him, but he's got to be a willing shooter, because teams are going to see if they can take something away from him. So if they're going to give him the outside shot, he has to take it as a point guard. That cannot be something that he just passes up. So he took that shot with confidence, even though he only made 1. He attacked the basket, again, struggled making shots, learning about the physicality. This is a bigger league, even slightly bigger. Yes, a lot of these guys are not going to be in the NBA next season, but they are taller, stronger, faster, by and large, than the competition that Jeremiah Fears faced in college. So that's an adjustment for him. But you saw him willing to take contact at times. You saw him run the offense with command. You saw him look older than his years while he was on the court. And I think that's a really encouraging sign for the New Orleans Pelicans, that they can have this young man in their building for the next few years and watch him grow up in this role to be the point guard. And I mentioned this yesterday on our show after the game, was that the Pelicans haven't had that kind of leadership at the point guard position since Rondo. Lonzo Ball wasn't a leader at the point guard spot. He had some skill. He was a great passer and became a knockdown shooter, but he was not the leader of that offense. When you look at what's happened the last few years and even last year, the expectation was that DeJounte Murray was going to come in and command the Pelicans offense and was going to push the team in tempo, was going to do a lot of things offensive-wise. He didn't shoot the ball well, take that part out of it. He got injured, take that part out of it. But what we saw on the floor from DeJounte Murray was not pushing the tempo. We didn't see exceptional athleticism to give you an advantage in the backcourt. You didn't see the kind of leadership that you expected, though players talked about it at times behind the scenes. and said DeJounte Murray was a good teammate. I'm not going to dispute that. But what you saw on the court, did you ever see DeJounte Murray pull a player by his jersey and say, you've got to be over there? Did he ever stand up to the coaching staff in a game and say, we got to get Trey Murphy shots. We got to get Zion on the post. We got to do these things. You never saw that. You never saw that. So if Jeremiah Fears is going to take this team by the horns and be the leader, then that has to start now. When you go back to a guy like Rondo, when you go back to point guards like Chris Paul, their first year, even if they weren't perfect, remember Rondo, they were talking about trading him after his first year in Boston. But even though they weren't perfect, they showed the assertiveness that the position requires. It's just like quarterback in the NFL. If you've got a timid point guard, if you've got a point guard who's not willing to take control of his team, then you likely have a team that doesn't win. Let's look at the teams that made it to the finals this year. Indiana, they were defined in a lot of ways by their point guard, Tyrese Halliburton. Oklahoma City, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is their point guard. That is his team. You know, you could go back. The Knicks are Jalen Brunson's team. Luka Doncic is the point guard for the Lakers. That's his team. Many of the best players in this league right now, whether it's Kyrie Irving, whether you talk about James Harden, whatever, point guards are dominating the game. So the Pelicans need Jeremiah Fears to be that type of player. Derek Queen, not as good a game, still finished with a double-double, 13 points, 10 rebounds. But for Queen, stats aside, the first half, pretty timid. Just didn't look for his shot. And yeah, the Pelicans didn't force feed him at times in the first half, but he just wasn't engaged at the level that he should be. And it shouldn't be on the Pelicans for a rookie to find their way to get him to play with energy. He played with better energy in the second half, but defensively, he has a long way to go. It looks like he has to get better conditioning. It looks like he needs to. The thing about Derek Queen that I've seen since he got drafted, and it has nothing to do with his talent. The thing that you're concerned about is, one, he seems really young. When you watch that young man talk, he sounds young. He looks young. He acts young. And he's almost 20. So he's not a baby of this class. He's older than a lot of members of his freshman class. So when you look at that, you'd like to see him be a little bit more mature. Hopefully, and there's plenty of time for him to do that, to realize what it means to be a pro and to start attacking the game that way as a professional. This isn't college. This is the NBA. You got to bring it 80 nights a year in the NBA. Well, with load management, 65. But you've got to play hard against people who are playing for their livelihoods every night. And you want to see that type of intensity out of Derek Queen, whether he's making shots or not, because there is a big opening, on this team for a power forward to come in and make himself make his presence felt. Zion Williamson is going to be playing less power forward as we go forward. It seems the Pelicans understand and want to utilize him on the perimeter more as a downhill attacker rather than somebody who works in the low post. So if you're Derek Queen, that is your area to stake out. That is your area to dominate. And he's got to start getting that, because he showed he can handle the basketball. Too many turnovers, but that's a rookie problem. You're going to see turnovers from rookies. But the big thing for me was just his effort. You want to see his aggressiveness on display on the court. If he really feels that he's the best player in his class, then you got to go out there and show it. It has nothing to do with the numbers. It has nothing to do. Everybody struggled by and large in their first game. Every highly drafted player pretty much struggled in their first game. That's the case. But what you want to see is this guy going to be a good teammate as a rookie? Because the focus will not be on you in all likelihood. There are more established players on every team where most of these guys are going, who are going to demand their respect and their shots each and every night. So if you're a young player, the first thing you have to do is fit in. And the way you fit in is by doing what you do well. Yves Missi, back for his second summer league after becoming a surprising starter last year. For Yves, you see things that remind you of last season in both the good and the bad. He still makes himself too small in the post. Corey Brewer talked a lot about he has to finish those shots. He just finished 5 of 15 from the field, and that's way more disturbing than anything that Derek Queen shot, any line that Jeremiah Fears put up. Yves Missi going 5 for 15 after a year in the NBA, after he says he's bulked up, after he should come back a little bit better in his second year than he did in his first. Eve still struggled offensively, pulled up and took a jumper that airballed. He got his shot blocked on multiple occasions by the rookie Garanger. It was not a great performance for Eve. He still does the things that he does well. He rebounded on the offensive glass at a high level, 7 offensive boards, I believe. But his offense, and he's never going to be anything more than a 5th option, I believe, in his NBA career, but he has to be consistent at finishing. And Eve had a relatively low field goal percentage for somebody who takes the vast majority of his shots within 5 feet of the basket. And that cannot continue into next year. Finally, we look at Micah Peavey, the 2nd-round pick out of Georgetown. And I think you saw exactly out of Micah Peavey what you wanted to see. He was aggressive from the opening tip. He was a solid defender, and he wanted to guard, and he guarded multiple positions, picked up a lot of fouls, but I think that's a good thing for a perimeter player. I don't want to see post players grab a lot of fouls, but I do want to see perimeter players being aggressive defensively, trying to figure out the NBA whistle and understand how refs are going to call this game. The NBA, again, is going to be different. I was surprised the Pelicans came out in a zone that's not really the best defense to start ingratiating people to the NBA. You want them to play man. You want to be able to guard the guy who's in front of you. But Micah Peavey was not shaken by the moment. He made his shots when he was given the opportunity. He moved the basketball, didn't have a lot of assists, but he moved the basketball. He rebounded well for his position and gives off, and as the guys kind of discussed this, some Josh Hart vibes, but with a better handle than Josh Hart had and likely a better outside shot early in his career. So we shall see how Micah Peavey develops, but he went a lot closer to earning himself a real position on the roster as a 2nd-round pick. And the Pelicans have been successful in the last few years, of course, with their 2nd-round picks. The 2nd-round pick we need to talk about, first and foremost, is Herb Jones. And Herb Jones received a 3-year, $68 million extension from the New Orleans Pelicans. That was announced by a number of sources yesterday. It hasn't been officially confirmed by the Pelicans, but it should be in short order. And let's just start with the economic value before we get into some of this stuff. Herb Jones last season, among NBA players, was not extremely well paid. We go into this season and next, the 2025-26 season and the 2026-27 season before the extension kicks in. This upcoming season, Herb Jones will be the 128th highest paid player in the NBA. 128. Are there 127 players better than Herb Jones in the NBA right now? No. Next year, the 2026-27, Herb Jones climbs currently. This is without all the contract free agents and things that go in. But currently, the way things stand for the 2026-27 season, Herb Jones is the 98th highest paid player in the NBA. I don't think there are 97 players better than Herb Jones in the NBA. That's not what contracts are about, obviously, but certainly they give you some indication of a player's value. And Herb Jones has outperformed the value that the Pelicans have paid him over his first 4 seasons. The big thing that when you're talking about this is a gamble. This is a gamble because you're hoping that Herb Jones, the best is yet to come for him, particularly on the offensive end, because you know what he is defensively. He's one of the few players in the last 4 years to have at least 350 steals and 150 blocks. He's been on the all defensive team. He finished in the top 5 for defensive player of the year balloting. We know what he is and how impactful he is on that end of the floor. He has been impactful on the offensive end in most ways, but he has to up his scoring. And we're going to get a little deeper into that in just a minute. But when you look at Herb, the offensive part is going to be the big thing. Last year, he took a step back. Again, didn't play a lot of games due to injury, but there was a step back offensively where he averaged 10 points, 4 boards, 3 assists. But if we're getting the Herb Jones from the previous year, 24-25 season, when he shot over 40% from 3, that's the Herb Jones you need to see. Because defensively, you're not worried about that. And as a connector, I'm not worried about that. But his offensive game at this point is mostly opportunistic. It's him getting the basketball off of offensive rebounds. It's him getting it off of cuts, secondary cuts, not the primary player ever on a play. It's him scoring in transition off of a steal or off of a turnover. And then, just hustling. So he has to be a more consistent part of the offense. And that part is the thing that is on both the Pelicans and Herb Jones. His volume for three-point shots in particular has been too low. Only 273 three-point attempts during that 23-24 season when he shot above 40%. He's going to have to increase that. But the Pelicans are making a bet that at 26 years old, that Herb Jones over the next 5 years will continue to get better, that they are getting his prime under contract. And I think that that's a reasonable bet, but it is absolutely still a bet. There are chances that this could fail. And that's nothing against Herb Jones. But when you take a player who is primarily a defensive player, that's what you are banking on from the beginning. And Herb Jones came in as primarily a defensive player, though he was SEC Player of the Year. You didn't take him. The Pelicans didn't draft him for his scoring ability. They drafted for his ability to play basketball. But now he has to develop scoring as a skill. And it's clear that when Joe Dumars said he wanted to build around Zion Williamson, that he wants to build around the guys who have performed well with Zion Williamson. And I've said this many times, Herb Jones has always played his best, and Zion Williamson has played his best with Herb Jones on the floor. It's hard to replace a Herb Jones. And I get the concerns financially. The league keeps raising the salary cap, but even that $23 million for Herb, if he's not an offensive player, will get to be a lot. It could be something that hamstrings the franchise if he does not continue to evolve as an offensive player. But I want to show you why I am optimistic about Herb Jones's future on offense. The player that I have compared Herb Jones to the most has been Derek White. And no, they are not exactly the same player in what their skill set is, but their roles were very similar when they entered the league. They were both 23 years old, older players when they came into the NBA, played, their full college allotment. Were small time, more role players when they were first brought in the league and gained bigger roles as they improved. Now, the thing for Derek White, the big catalyst for him was going from San Antonio to Boston. But even during that season in San Antonio, his last season in San Antonio, which was his fourth, he had started to become that player that he is now with the Boston Celtics, where he's a highly efficient offensive player, an elite defender, and a guy who went from role player to Olympian. And that kind of stride, I don't know if it's completely there for Herb, but I think that there's reasons to be encouraged. And I'll start with this. Let's look at some stats here, okay? So this is Herb Jones and Derek White for their first 4 seasons. Okay, so the games, Herb Jones has played more games. Herb Jones played more minutes. But look at the shooting numbers here. He shot better from the floor. He shot better from 3. His free throw percentage is essentially the same. Higher effective field goal percentage, and his win shares per 48. Even with the bad teams, 2 losing records in 4 seasons for Herb Jones. Even on those bad teams, his win shares per 48 is almost directly in line with Derek White. That's their first 4 seasons. Now, I'll look at these 100 possession stats here, just per 100 possessions. Herb Jones, Derek White, and then at the bottom, I have Herb's first 3 seasons taking last year's injury-plagued campaign out of it. But when we look at this, again, Herb Jones is extremely comparable to Derek White in those first 4 seasons, and in some areas just flat out beats him. Higher offensive rating in those first 3 seasons, still higher overall over 4 seasons. Defensive ratings about the same for these 4 years. Net rating favors Herb Jones. Scoring Derek White, certainly. Rebounding Derek White just by a fraction. Assists Derek White in the backcourt, he had more of those responsibilities. But Herb Jones in steals, right there, blocks right there, and Herb a more efficient ball handler with fewer turnovers. The big thing here, when you look at this, is that Herb Jones has not taken the volume of shots that Derek White did. Derek White averaged almost 7 threes per game in his 4th season. Herb has averaged just over 3 in the 2023-24 season, just over 3 during that season. He has to double that shot attempt, double shot attempts. Because when we look at this team again, not a lot of volume 3-point shooters. So certain players are going to have to up their per game averages when it comes to getting their 3-point attempts. You're going to need 8 to 9 from Trey Murphy III. You're going to need 6 from Herb Jones. You're going to need 8 or 9 from Jordan Poole. You get 9 from those two guys, and you get 6 from Herb Jones. That's 24 3-point attempts right there. So you need about 11 more from the rest of the team to get to where you want to be, that 35 attempt per game, area. Those 11, that's a lot easier to split up 11 threes than it is to split up 20, 25 from the rest of your players who are not your primary scorers. So to split up 11 between the group of Jordan Hawkins and Sadiq Bey and Zion Williamson and all these other guys that are on this roster, I think it's a lot easier to do that. But the main thing is going to be, can Herb Jones get that 3-point attempt number up? If he can get that number up and shoot with that relative efficiency between 38% and 42% as he shot during the 23-24 season, if he's shooting between 38 and 42% consistently on 6 attempts per game, Herb Jones increases his value tremendously, and that $23 million over that extension will look like a bargain. It's $23 million annually will look like a bargain for Herb Jones. But I think that ultimately, the NBA is a league with a small group of transformational stars, but a large group of role players. And Herb Jones is elite at what he does as a role player. The Pelicans are better with him on the floor, on both ends of the floor. They are better with him, significantly better. One of my other stats for Herb is that he's finished first or second in on-off rating every year of his career with the Pelicans. He's either been first or second. The only time he's been passed up, once by Brandon Ingram and once by Zion Williamson. But every year he's been first or second in what the team's impact is with him on versus off the court. And I think that tells you a lot about Herb Jones. And I think when Joe Dumars looks at Herb Jones, he sees the kind of look. This is a guy who had Dennis Rodman as a teammate, Rick Mahorn, Bill Laimbeer, Vinnie Johnson, elite role players to make that Detroit Pistons team go. That really only had 2 All-Stars in Isaiah and Dumars. The rest of that team was elite role players. And I think that when he looks at Herb Jones, he sees a player that you cannot win if you don't have that guy on the team. The thing is going to be, it's on Zion, it's on these other guys, and it's on Willie Green to figure out how to get Herb those shots. Because if he's not taking shots, he is less valuable in the minutes that he's playing. All right, let's go to looking at the Pelicans as far as how far they need to get to be a contending team. And the big focus has been looking at the profile of what the best teams are, where they fit in. And last season, there were 9 50-win teams and 4 other teams that won at least 45 games. So that gives you 13 teams in the league that won at least 45 games. Of the 50-win teams, the lowest offensive rating for 50-win teams in their ranking was 15. The average for them, the average offensive rating for a 50-win team ranking was just under 7. So the average for 50-win teams was a top 10, top 8 offensive team. For the 45-win teams, the lowest ranked offense was 16th, and that's Golden State. Of the 45-win teams, their average offensive rating ranking was 10. So you take those two teams, neither one is below 10 in the average of where they finished offensively. On the defensive side, the lowest defensive rating for a 50-win team was number 21 with the Denver Nuggets. They have consistently finished in the lower end offensively and defensively. They are kind of an anomaly amongst the teams that have won championships recently in where they place. So their being 21 was by far the lowest on the defensive side for 50-win teams. But the overwhelming majority of those teams, 7 of those 9 50-win teams finished in the top 15 defensively. The average ranking for those teams was 9.6. So still, the average ranking for 50-win teams was a top 10 defense. for the 45-win teams, the lowest defensive rate. This is how critical it has to be for the marginal. The team's 45 is a good season, but not a great season. At 45 wins, those defenses are actually better than the 50-win teams. Their lowest amongst the 45-win teams was 12th ranked, and the average was 9th. So slightly better, 9.6 to 9 for the 45-win teams. So when you look at this, of the top 15 offenses last year, 13 of those, 13 of the top 15 offenses were held by 45 or 50-win teams. On the defensive end, 11 of the top 15 spots defensively, 11 of those 13 teams that finished with 45 to 50 wins finished in the top 15 defensively. So to be even a mediocre team, a slightly above mediocre, a 45-win team, which is only 4 wins above 500, to be that, you have to be a top 10 offense and a top 10 defense. For the New Orleans Pelicans, that has not been an easy feat. And I want to compare this to, I want to look at these numbers. This is the yearly offensive rating for the Pelicans. That's them in red. When you look at the NBA champion of these years is the one in blue. And when you look at the average offensive rating for the top 15 teams per year, that's the gold line. So where you see the Pelicans on offense have been below the average and below the champion in every year under Willie Green. That offensive piece is critical for the New Orleans Pelicans if they really want to be a legitimate playoff team year in and year out. Their offense has to get a lot closer to that blue line, which you see there's a significant gap every year between the New Orleans Pelicans and that blue line, the NBA champion. There's still a reasonable gap between the Pelicans and the average of the top 15. There's still the only year offensively where the Pelicans closed that gap was the 23-24 season when what? They won 49 games. You see how it ticked up 36 wins in 21-22. It ticks up to 42 wins in 22-23. Offense is going up. 23-24, still below the average. But right there, that's your best season, 49 wins. And then last year, you see the clear drop-off for the New Orleans Pelicans as compared to the better teams in the league. And remember, we're talking 1 through 15, the top half. I'm not just talking about the elite teams, 1 through 15. So these are your playoff teams, right? Your top 16 is your playoff group. And the one offense that fell out of that, Golden State, was 16th. So when you look at it, 92% of the top 15 offenses made the playoffs. 73% of the top defenses made the playoffs. So look at the Pelicans here defensively. Really bad in 2021-22. 22-23 is the only year where the Pelicans, not yearly bad in 21-22. That's the champs. So the champions have gone. Defensive rating has been great, but the Pelicans' defensive rating wasn't really bad at 112, but it was a significant drop off for them in that first year. Second year, again, below the average of the top 15, below the champions average. The 23-24 season, that's the only season where the Pelicans are better than average, but still they're still higher than the champion. They weren't as good as the champion in 2023-24. And then last year, you see again the spike in defensive rating just completely blowing everything out of the water. But overall, when you look at this team, I think what you see is clearly the biggest gains that they have to make are on the offensive end. They will not be, it's hard to be as bad as they were defensively last year, but they will not be significantly better in my mind. They will be better, but they are still small. You saw yesterday in Summer League that they don't have a lot of interior rim protection. Yves Missi didn't block a single shot. Derek Queen didn't block a single shot. You don't have a lot of bigs other than that. And on the other side of the court, Minnesota had, I believe, 8 or 9 block shots against the Pelicans. The West is getting bigger and bigger when it comes to the front courts. Kelly Olynyk coming back from the Wizards over to the Spurs. Look how much size they have. Look at the Clippers with Brook Lopez and Ivica Zubac. And then they, who's the other center they signed recently? But, teams are just getting bigger in the front court. It's down to the Pelicans and the Lakers pretty much looking for bigs amongst the better teams in the West. And it feels like at this case, if you can't defend the interior, that means Kevon Looney is going to have a bigger role than maybe you'd want him to. And that's a problem too. This is a guy who's played no more than 25 minutes in a game on average for his career. So you're not trying to push this guy into starter minutes. But if they can't defend on the back end, then you may be required to play Kevon Looney a bit more than you'd like. And I think that that's a worry and a concern for the New Orleans Pelicans. They have to be better offensively. And we've talked about this before. The biggest part of that comes from what? Lack of turnovers. They have to take care of the basketball. That's a concern, obviously, right now. Getting your three-point attempts up, not dramatically so, but consistently so. They don't have to be a 43-point attempt team, but they have to be consistent in their approach, and they've got to make a better percentage of those shots. The best percentage teams are more likely to get in more than the more volume teams when it comes to three. So you need accurate shooters on the court when they are taking those shots. You need to generate good looks, and you need to take more of those threes from the corner. This is something that I've been consistent with the Pelicans on since Willie Green took over as the head coach, is they shoot so few three-pointers from the corner, and other teams shoot so many against them. So Willie Green, more than anything, this is almost like a Dennis Allen type situation where if you don't fix the offense, you won't be here much longer. And I think Pelicans fans are kind of in some ways now hoping for a Dennis Allen situation, that Willie Green gets removed at some point during the regular season, and that there's a new coach in place who can breathe some life into this team, particularly on that end of the floor, and we can see what their potential could be with some guidance on the offensive end. It's just been consistently below par with Willie Green at the helm. All right, that's the content for today. Let's get into the questions today. So plenty of that. Let's see. Let's try to get into these questions. Let's see what we got today. A lot coming through. Grubb, do you think the Pels will upgrade the starting center position? I can't see them playing two big lineups this year. Not with what they currently have. They can't play two big lineups because I don't know who could play together unless you're playing Carlo on the perimeter. And I'm kind of surprised that, I mean, maybe it's an international travel issue for Carlo, but I'm surprised he's not playing this year. I think he could really use the opportunity to get on the court and see how he pairs with Eve a little bit more in these games. So I think it's unlikely that the Pelicans can throw out a lot of two big lineups this season. You're not going to put Kevon Looney and Eve Missi on the court together. That just doesn't make sense. You're not going to play a lot of Derek Queen and Eve Missi. It just doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to do that. To have Derek Queen, Eve Missi, and Zion Williamson on the floor, that seems like a problem. So I don't think the Pelicans are going to play a ton of two big lineups unless they can upgrade at the center position. And the problem now is there are not a lot of those guys available unless you want to pay for them. And if you're going to pay for them, what are you paying with? What assets do you have right now to give up other than more picks? And I don't think the Pelicans are in a position to give up more picks right now because of the uncertainty with the Zion Williamson situation. You can't afford to give up first-round picks if after this year you all of a sudden decide, let's say Zion plays 30 games and is hurt a bunch. Again, the Pelicans say, all right, it's time to move on. You need those picks because now you're rebuilding completely from the ground up and you're retooling around two very young players. So you need to find talent to surround those guys with. So I think that the Pelicans utilizing first round picks to get more talent right now isn't going to happen. You just signed Herb Jones to an extension. He's not going anywhere. You just signed Trey Murphy to an extension. He's not going anywhere. So who are you trading to get a decent quality center in this league? What do you have available? Jose Alvarado? Is Jose Alvarado going to get you a starting caliber center? I don't think so. You're going to have to tie some stuff to it. And again, if you're tying up assets, I just don't see that. Kessler or Vucevic, look, you'd love to have Walker Kessler. You'd love to have him. But I don't think the Jazz are trying to give him up for a low price. I think we've seen stuff where they're asking for multiple first rounders for Walker Kessler. So the Pelicans can't afford to give that up. 3 years from now, who's the starting five for the Pelicans and why? Well, I think you can go ahead and pencil in Fears and Queen in that starting five. The rest of it, honestly, I don't think I'd pencil in anybody today. Honestly, the level of uncertainty with this franchise, I don't know how you could bet on any one of those players who isn't on a rookie contract being here in 3 years. Are you going to bet on Zion Williamson being here in 3 years? When you got players and former players speculating that he'll be done by 30? Are you counting on Trey Murphy to be here for 3 more years if the Pelicans are really bad over the next year or two? I think Trey's gone. I think Herb's gone if that happens. I think Jose is gone if that happens. Jordan Poole is only under contract for the next 2 seasons. He would be gone. So if you're not on a rookie deal, it could just be Queen, Missi, and Fears on the current roster showing up in 3 seasons. You know, it's such a long way away now, the way the NBA is. It seems like it should happen and teams should evolve over a longer time span. But now you only get a 2 to 3 year window with your roster to build it out and find out what you have. So for the Pelicans, I think you're more likely to see a brand new team 3 years from now than some variation of 4 or 5 guys from this current group. If you're not a championship team, there's going to be a major overhaul coming in the near future. I wish there was a jersey rebrand or update. I think we would all appreciate to see a jersey rebrand or update. Did Herb Jones make himself a huge trade target with that contract extension? He's going to remain one as long as he's healthy. If Herb Jones stays healthy, he's a guy who helps winning teams be better. And I think that's the concern with the Pelicans is if they're not a winning team, his value, they're overpaying for his abilities. But for a winning team, it's a reasonable contract. When you look at the guys who are elite role players in this league, it's a reasonable contract. Would you say Herb Jones is as important to the Pelicans as Miles Turner was to the Pacers last year and the money that he's now getting to leave Indiana? Would you say Herb Jones belongs in that similar conversation financially? I would say yes. You're not getting the kind of points that you're getting on those counting numbers, but as far as like improving your offense, improving your defense, and contributing, the value I think would be the same, if not more, for Herb. So I think that he's going to be a candidate as long as he's in the league and he's playing well. And certainly if you're rebuilding the team, he and Trey right now are your 2 biggest assets, even bigger than Zion Williamson, who is the more talented player, but comes with the greater risk. I think teams would look at Herb and Trey as 2 very low risk, high reward players. And so I think Herb's contract is still reasonable in today's NBA as the salary cap continues to go up and the league's revenues continue to grow. As long as that's the case, and Herb Jones stays healthy, he will be a target for somebody. What moves do the Pels need to still make to be a playoff team? I mean, they've got to get better at interior defense, and they need more shooting, or at least they need the shooters on this roster to be better. I think the other move is one that just won't come for the near future, and that's the removal of Willie Green as head coach. And it's not. I know it just feels like, hey, are y'all just attacking Willie or something like that? Man, it's just the record is what it is. The record is what it is. And it's not to say he won't ever be a good coach. I don't know that. I'm not going to speak on anybody's future. And it's not to say that there haven't been times when he hasn't performed up to the task. But overall, I don't think that anybody has the confidence that Willie Green is going to lead this franchise any further than he already has. You don't see Willie Green coaching his team to the conference finals. You don't see Willie Green coaching his team to the NBA finals. So if that's the case, if we're not looking at Willie Green doing anything other than just providing you the same record that he has already, the same offense that you've already seen before, then what do you think that you're going to get that's any different? So I think the biggest thing that you can do is move Willie Green on and do better there. My dog, I'm asking, what were we the year we won 49 games? In what way? What were we as far as what you talking about? Offense? You talking about defense? What were we? I may have missed something that you put. Lido to God in the building. Y'all check out his music, man, for real. It's dope. And then on it today, kind of when the Clips came back after first time in 15 years, perfect day to kind of pair that up with those two, the Clips and then Can't Kill God. Go ahead and check that out. Look, this big thickness thing, I don't know what this is about. It's kind of funny, but it's also a little nuts to me. If you make the shirt and you send it to the boot crew, I'll wear the shirt. I'm at least a good sport about things. So if you send the shirt to boot crew, I'll wear the shirt one time. I do the t-shirt, so it has to be a t-shirt. You know, don't put no collar on it or nothing like that. But if it looks good, I'll wear it. I'll be a good sport. Derek Queen question. Derek Queen can create offense, of course. He's not 100% NBA ready, but this is a player that if you develop his game, he can really be a threat. I agree. He can absolutely be a threat, but I think we have to allow him to be Derek Queen and not keep trying to make him other players. He's not DeMarcus Cousins. DeMarcus Cousins came in and was stronger. DeMarcus Cousins had a better three-point shot coming in. And he moves a little bit differently. And Boogie really liked showing how assertive he could be on the block. That's not really Derek Queen's thing as much. So I think that they're different. Let's allow him to be the first Derek Queen rather than trying to say, well, he's mini Jokic or he's mini Boogie or he's this guy. Let him be Derek Queen. Whatever Derek Queen is going to be, let him figure that out and let him be confident in that, because it's a lot of pressure to put on anybody to call them the next Jokic or the next Cousins or whatever. Because at one time, any of those guys that you're comparing him to were mentioned as the best center, if not the best player in the case of Jokic in the entire NBA. So to put that on him at this stage, look, we didn't know Jokic was going to be Jokic when he got to the league. And I'm not saying Derek Queen is going to turn into the best player in the NBA, but let's allow the growth and allow him the space to be the player that he's going to be. Quality dividends. I've seen different opinions on Zion's optimal position. What position do you think him playing unlocks the most upside for the Pels? I think the 3 ends up being his position, not a necessity. But I think, honestly, if you look at the way he plays and the player I compare him to, and my dog gets mad at me for this one, but I compare him to Allen Iverson, not because they have the same mentality, but because they are basically, as far as their unique skill set, you would never call Allen Iverson a shooter, but he was a scorer, an elite scorer, because he got volume, and he also because he was relentless in his attacks to the basket. You were not going to stop Allen Iverson from going to the bucket. I think that's the same kind of quality as Zion Williamson has, where the defense has to pay attention to him constantly. He's always going downhill. And I think essentially what he is a big 2 guard. He is a really strong 6'6", 6'7" 2 guard who attacks the bucket, and everybody has to play off of him. If that's the case, then you're playing Trey at the 3, which is his most natural position, and you find that 4. The 4 has become the black hole for the Pelicans in finding somebody who can play in the front court with Zion Williamson now. If Queen can expand his game, maybe he can become that 4. But it seems if right now his best spot is going to be at center and some 4, but it depends on who the center is. So if you're playing Queen at the 4, you're probably more likely to play Zion at the 5. But I think Zion's ultimate position on a court assignment, it's going to be small forward. But I think the way he plays makes him much more of a 2 guard than a power forward. Yeah. Again, I agree with you, Z-Rosh. He didn't become a tradable asset. He's always been a tradable asset. I think after Herb's rookie year, he established himself as a player's player. Players around the league were talking about him. He was already getting, we were seeing promotions for him from other competitors around the NBA for all defensive team as a rookie. I think Herb Jones has always been a highly sought after asset. His contract is still, again, relatively team friendly. And if you missed it earlier when I talked about his overall contract value, next year, he's the 128th paid player in the NBA. And currently for the 26-27 season, he's the 98th highest paid player in the league. And I in either case, I don't think there are more players there's that many players above Herb Jones who are better than he is. So I agree that the Pelicans have made a deal. Why don't I believe in Missi? You don't think he would develop into a top 10 center in the league? No, I don't. I think he'll be a serviceable center. serviceable. I think he can be a starting center in the NBA for a number of years. But no, I don't think he's going to turn into a top 10 center. You don't see the things that, make you to believe that. Do you see him being an all-star, giving you, I think the comp here is if you're getting the best out of Yves Missi, you're getting Jamal McGlure, at his peak. And that guy was a 13-10 guy. And that's fine. If Yves Missi, and I got to stop saying the S because there's no S on it. I just got in a habit because everybody else was doing it. If Yves Missi gives you 13, 10, and 2 every night, if Yves Missi gives you 13, 10, and 2, that's not going to be top 10 center in the league numbers, right? You're not saying that that's a guy who's going to dominate every night, but you can win with that. You can win a lot of games with that. If he becomes 90% of Clint Capella at his peak, I think you'd be satisfied with that. If he proves me wrong and he proves he has a higher ceiling and he ends up as an all-star, I'll be the first to praise him. I love post players. Centers and power forwards, that's my area. That's where I want to see guys succeed because I think the league is better when the big men are doing their thing. So it's not that I don't have confidence in Yves. I just think that there's a ceiling, for him. And that ceiling is still a very good, serviceable player. I just don't think he's ever going to dominate offensively in the NBA. And I think he's still a bit small to dominate on the defensive end. But I think he can be a very good player for a number of years for the Pelicans. All right, we're going to take about 2 or 3 more. We can go to 130. We'll go to 130 and then call it a day. Do you think that Derek Queen should go through the Trey Murphy type journey with going through the G League for a bit? I would imagine that both of these guys are going to see some time in the G League this season. We'll see how long it is, but I think at some point, both of them will see some time in the G League in order to refine their games. And there's nothing wrong with that. To give Fears the opportunity at certain times to run the offense on his own without having to be with the second unit, know that he's going to get taken out, know that if he makes some turnovers that they can't afford that on the NBA in an NBA game where you're trying to win. And this is a team that says that is trying to make the playoffs this year. If that's the case, then I think that you at some points need to find him minutes to continue to learn. He's not going to be best served giving you 8 to 10 minutes every night off the bench as you try to fight to win. And Willie Green's job right now is to win games. It's not, and he would probably say this, he won't say it publicly, but I think at home when he thinks about what he needs to do this year, he's not thinking as much about developing the kids as he is about trying to save his job by making the playoffs. That's what he's trying to do. So if you're doing that, you don't do that by playing rookies heavy minutes unless they are elite rookies. And these guys have room to grow just to be consistent role players. So I think both of them, both Queen and Fears, will probably see some time at some point in the G League. It's going to be up to them how quickly they get back. Because we've seen all these guys, right? We've seen Trey Murphy. We've seen Jordan Hawkins. We've seen, all these guys at different times. Some of these first round picks for the Pelicans have had to do their bid in the G League and figure some things out. And at the very least, even if you don't get supremely better skill wise, it builds your confidence up because you're getting shots on the regular. You're getting the opportunity to show your entire skill set where you cannot do that in the NBA and make mistakes. So I think absolutely both of those players will get their opportunity in the G League. No, I do not wear an XL. I am. How am I going to be big thickness and you talking about I wear XL? These are 2 X's over here. It's 2 X's. I'm a big. Come on now. Come on. We talking about 250 over here. Grubb, who is the ideal forward at the 4 spot? Either mid-level player or high-level role player. I kind of would like, and I want to let me double check that he is still available. But there are a couple players who I still kind of like, who I don't know if they are available right now. So let me double check this. But I think that I would have loved to see the Pelicans get a guy like Chris Boucher, who was a free agent for the Raptors. Certainly he would have been an interesting choice, a guy who blocks shots, who could make the 3-pointer, who has shown at times that he could be a very skilled player. He would have been somebody. But I think right now, like you look at the options, I'd be calling Houston maybe. because they have a lot of centers at this point. So I think I'd be talking to Houston and maybe seeing if they're interested in moving Atari Eason maybe to see if he has some potential. But the problem is as we talked about off the top, all these Western Conference teams are doubling down on their size. So trying to steal somebody from anybody else is going to be even more difficult than it has been in the past for the Pelicans, because I just don't know how many viable options there are left for them at that spot. When you look at the centers who are still available, or the fours who are still available, there's not a lot out there. There's just not a lot out there. But Boucher is still available. So I'd like to see the Pelicans see what he can do. A guy who's, a little bit older at 33 years old, going to be 33 when when the season starts. I like him. But other than that, maybe you take a chance. Maybe this is the year for those fans who have been clamoring for it. Maybe you take a shot at Bol. Maybe you do. I don't think he's going to be your solution at the 4, but if you're looking for upside, he's a guy who could do it. If you're looking to try to bet on maybe some experience and potential upside, maybe a Kai Jones from Dallas as a free agent could work. I don't think you have a chance to get Precious Achiuwa out of the Knicks. I think he's going to stay where he is. And I don't think anybody else on that list is really particularly attractive to the Pelicans. Everybody else, and Thomas Bryant is still on the market. Thomas Bryant is still on the market and only made $2.7 million last year. Thomas Bryant could still be an option for the Pelicans. He wouldn't play the 4 spot, but let's say you could move Kevon Looney at 6'9" to the 4 a little bit more often and let him play the 4 and let Thomas Bryant get some of those minutes at center. I think that becomes kind of interesting there as a group. The rest of the group, it's just a lot of old veterans: Micah Potter, Bismack Biyombo, Alex Len, Charles Bassey, Tristan Thompson, Taj Gibson, who's 40, DeAndre Jordan, who's 37, Al Horford, who's going to be 40 in a minute. So there's just not a lot of options available to the Pelicans at this point. I don't know if I would compare him to JaVale. JaVale was a legit 7'1". And I think JaVale was an elite athlete too. When you look at JaVale, basketball IQ wasn't high at the beginning, became a very dependable player at the end of his career. The last 4 or 5 years of his career was a very dependable serviceman. But I think that the thing about JaVale McGee was he was an elite athlete at 7'1", and then also came to the league with the experience of having a mother in Pam McGee, who was one of the great women players of all time, played in the WNBA, won multiple championships at USC. The game was much more familiar to him, and the growth level was more just on getting his brain to slow the game down rather than having to learn the game of basketball. He always had the skills, just didn't have the requisite IQ. The starting 5 for the Pelicans, who do I think it'll be this year? I'm going to start with, I think they go with the veterans, because I think that's just the way Willie Green is, and I think he's looking for the most balance possible. So I think you're going to go with Jordan Poole as your lead guard. I'm not going to call him the point guard. I'm going to say he's the lead guard. I think you just paid Herb Jones all his money. He's starting at the 2 as your defensive 2. Trey Murphy's going to play the 3. Zion Williamson will start at the 4, and Yves Missi will start at the 5. I think that Derek Queen likely becomes your 7th man. I think Sadiq Bey, if he's healthy, is the 6th man. And then I think Queen would be 7. I think now you start to get funky at that 8 spot, because is it Jose Alvarado, who was hanging out with Willie Green in Las Vegas yesterday, sitting right next to him? Brandon Ingram even commented on it on social media, said Willie sitting with his son. Do you think that early on, Willie Green is going to give minutes to Jeremiah Fears over Jose Alvarado? Now, he's used to playing Jose 20 minutes a night. Do you think he's going to pull back? That's the part that becomes the weird thing, is how do you make sure? Because you can't play a 2-guard lineup with Fears and Jose in the backcourt. It's too small and you're going to get killed defensively. So your combinations for Fears, you're either playing Fears with Herb Jones to be, to counteract the defensive shortcomings that Fears is going to have as a rookie, or you're playing him next to Jordan Poole, So but you're not playing him as a starter. So he's got to play with Jordan Poole, or you're playing him with Jordan Hawkins. So in those groups, how many minutes can he get? That's going to be on Jeremiah Fears to solve first and foremost, but it also may take a call from Joe Dumars down to Willie Green and say, we got to get this kid some minutes. Now, hopefully, I think Jeremiah Fears will prove that he deserves minutes, that will earn those minutes, and will, by the end of the year be much more of a rotational player. But point guard is such a hard position to adjust to. They cannot afford for the Pelicans to be a turnover machine. And Fears right now is a turnover machine. So I don't think he's going to start this season. I think that's the goal, to have him the starter next season. Man, this Danny Wolf thing, I know a lot of folks are disappointed, especially when Danny Wolf looked really good in his summer league debut. A lot of teams are really excited about him. Looking at Jeremy Grant as a trade, again, the money. Jeremy Grant's making a lot of money. Who do the Pelicans have to send that money back? Who are you taking out of the rotation to get a Jeremy Grant? That's the problem, is you've built this roster that has little financial flexibility. All of the money is dominated by players who you're counting on. And then you have this big $31 million hole caused by DeJounte Murray. And because of that, you are financially hamstrung in trying to make any other moves that would really significantly impact wins and losses. So you're stuck trying to fight around the margins and maybe move one of your third level players to try to get a little bit more flexibility. That's part of the reason Antonio Reeves is gone, is to give slightly more financial flexibility. But ultimately, the Pelicans are in a tough position financially this season, a tough one. This is an interesting question. I would almost rather be worse this year, but maximize Fears and Queen minutes. What I'll say to that is, I get it, because I have commented that I think sometimes, and the Pelicans failed on this during the Zion Williamson, the first 6 years of Zion Williamson's career under David Griffin, and I worry in some ways that they are about to make the same mistake. You building teams on two different timelines. It's one thing. And when you look at the Oklahoma City Thunder and how they did it, they bottomed out, started taking on some bad contracts for veterans, but investing in young players. As the bad veteran contracts circled out, they kept adding more young players. They believed in some of them, and those players started to pay off. Then last year before the season, what they do, when they felt like they were in position to make their finals push, that's when they invested their money, going big on the Hartenstein deal, going big on the Caruso contract, and bringing both of them to Oklahoma City, and giving themselves now the financial flexibility to give Shea a contract extension, to give Chet Holmgren a contract extension, and to give Jalen Williams a contract extension, all in the same offseason. So Oklahoma City now is locked up for years to come because they built their entire team on the same timeline. When they added veterans, it was to make a championship push. When you look at the Pelicans, they are not on a championship timeline. And I think people need to let that 49-win season go, because this ain't that team. You have some of the same people, but that don't make you the same team. The core of your defense has already been gutted from that team. And we saw the stats earlier that that was the best defensive year and the best offensive year for the Pelicans under Willie Green, and you got 49 wins, but you were still behind pace. This is not going to be a better defensive team than that 49-win team. It's not. Is it going to be a better offensive team? I don't know. That's a big question mark. So if that's the case, then you are potentially on two different timelines. One with Zion, Herb, Trey, and Jordan Poole, and then another one with Fears, Queen, Missi, and all the rest. If you're building the team that way, you have a chance of failing at both goals. You may not win now, and you may be setting yourself up to fail later. So I get the sentiment that look, if you took this season, you still had that. Even if you gave up the pick and you were going to be bad this year, you probably wouldn't give the pick up to get Queen if you knew you were going to be bad this year. But if you were going to be a mediocre team this year, play for the lottery or just play to give the young guys minutes, it could pay off more in the long term because you would be allowing those guys to get those failures out of the way now, and you'd also be giving them the trust. I wonder, and I think that'll be one of the things I'm watching all season long is, are the interests divided? Is it a long-term plan or is it a short-term plan? Because you cannot do both. You cannot do both. Show me a team that has done both successfully. Look at the Orlando Magic as another team. Young, very good defensively, really bad offensively, but focused on developing their young players, letting them lose, and then figuring it out. Remember, they went through, Borrego was there. They fired another coach, started coming out of it, fired, and Jamal Mosley, and now they have another coach. And you see him starting to build, right? Starting to build. They found their core, identified their core young players, and now they're adding the veterans to that group, like a Desmond Bane, and like they did what's his name, KCP, the year before. When you start adding those players, you're doing that to accentuate and to take your core of young players to the next level. Are the Pelicans, do they seem positioned to do that? They built a team around older young players. Herb going into year 5, Trey going into year 5, Zion going into year 7, Jose going into year 5. So, and Jordan Poole going into year 8, I believe, or 7 or 8 for him. So if that's what you're looking at, you're putting the young players to supplement your older players. And does that seem like it's something that's going to generate giant success for a franchise? If somebody can identify for me a team that is already doing that or has been successful do that, I'd love to see it. I'd love to see it because it doesn't happen. I'm not saying they can't do it, but this is why, when I think about the Pelicans, I say they're higher than 32 wins, I think, if they're healthy. Obviously, that's the biggest caveat of all. But I think they're a 36 to 42 win team based on how good they can bounce back from a 21 win season, based on the potential injuries, based on the amount of youth that they have. I think this is a 36 to 42 win team if things go right. If they get hurt, all bets are off. But I think it's really hard to put them as a 45 to 50 win team just looking at what we have to look forward to with this roster. Last thing, I'm gonna just be real quick on this, and then I'll do one more question. But I just did want to kind of mention this. We did get the groupings for the Pelicans for the NBA Cup. They will be in West Group B. That's with Dallas, the Clippers, the Lakers, and Memphis. Last season, the Pelicans went 2-12 against that quartet of teams. The only games that they won one against Dallas, and they won one against the Clippers. So 2-12 last season against the teams in the NBA Cup. Yeah, young prospect, I agree with you. Flanders, I just mentioned the over under. Yeah, higher than 32. Like I said, 36 to 42. Again, sixth man will be interesting. Will it be Jose? Will it be Sadiq Bey? Will it be, who is it going to be? Who is it going to be? All right, that should do it for today. We did about an hour. Yeah, a little bit more than an hour. I appreciate everybody tuning in. I appreciate your comments, and I appreciate the support. Stay tuned with us. We'll be back on Saturday after the Pelicans play their game against the Lakers. I think we'll be on Saturday. So check with us for that. Continue to like, continue to subscribe, continue to share. And you can find me on social media, as you know, at DM Grubb on Twitter and Instagram. You can also find me on TikTok and Blue Sky. And don't forget to check out the bird rights. I wrote up an article on the Herb Jones extension and what it could mean for the Pelicans. So you can check that out as well. Until the next time, this has been David Grubb here on the Post Up on Boo Crew Media. Y'all have a great day.